Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Friday, December 17th, 2021. If you'd like additional weather information, as always, you can go online to weather.gov/Alaska. We have all sorts of information there for the region. And if you want to expand to other parts of the country, the lower 48, Hawaii, you can go to just weather.gov. You'll see a big map there that you can click on any location in the country so you can check up on forecast, watches, warnings, advisories that may affect your friends or family. So certainly check that out if you can. And overall, I have not changed the headlines coming up here. A progressive pattern is going to continue through the end of December into the early new year. Bearing systems are going to bring increasingly milder air. We're going to see some big ridging in the upper atmosphere, which facilitates that warmer air. Precipitation along the west and southwest coast as these bearing systems move inland will spread across the interior and could be heavy at times. We have a system that's going to likely produce some heftier snowfall here as we go through the weekend from west and southwest, pushing inland, especially along north of the Alaska Range. We could see a period, an interval of below normal temperatures around the Panhandle near Christmas time, but it's still looking like after that, just toward the end of the month into the beginning of the new year, there could be another pretty big ridge develop out over the Bering, and that'll press eastward, bringing milder air to much of the state here to bring in the new year. But otherwise, looking at the webcams this afternoon, Scammon Bay was 32 degrees with some light snow. They had a front come through there, so conditions are improving now after they had a winter weather advisory. And then in the southern Panhandle, Clover Pass north of Ketchikan was 29 this afternoon with some light snow. And some heavier snow fell around Port Alexander there, south of Sitka. As much as 8 inches of snow fell. And we still have the winter weather advisory for the Sitka areas come down right at this time, so things are improving. And will continue for Ketchikan and Heidelberg there in the southern part of the Panhandle until midnight tonight, but we're not really anticipating that much more snow here as we go through the evening. Further north, it's kind of, I'll explain this as best as I can. The yellow areas are current winter weather advisories. The ones that are on the east end of Norton Sound will be coming down at 9 o'clock, and the ones further toward the interior, Tanana there, will be done by noon Saturday. Then we have winter storm watches in orange. Imagine the orange on top of the yellow areas, plus the orange areas that are there. That is for winter storm watch for the system that's going to be coming in Saturday night into Sunday, lingering into Monday, especially as it spreads eastward into the interior. So we are anticipating some significant snowfall across the interior with the next system. Areas of the coast, though, could see a period of snow that changes to some freezing rain, and then rain as much milder air works its way in through areas, say, from Nome southward. We can see temperatures getting quite a bit above freezing. So here on the satellite imagery, we still have low pressure just southwest there of Ketchikan and Sitka. That's helping to enhance the snow showers there today. And then a brighter band of clouds across the southwest. Those enhanced clouds are with a current frontal system working its way into the southwest interior, knocking on the door of south central. Back to the west, curl in the clouds there west of St. Matthew Island. That's the low center working its way east-northeastward. That feature will be moving in to the west coast overnight and early tomorrow. And then as we go into Saturday, later Saturday and Sunday, see the brighter clouds in the western Aleutians shimmy westward toward the coast of Japan. That's the next system that's going to be the storm system that impacts much of the area here as we go into later Saturday and into Sunday and even into Monday. So here is the weather map. This Friday afternoon, low pressure there located southwest of the Panhandle. And then as we go here, the front's currently working its way into the southwest, and we have low pressure there near St. Matthew working its way eastward into the lower Yukon Delta. And then back to the west is that next system that's going to be impacting the west and interior as we go through the weekend. High pressure is going to begin to build, though, over northwest Canada, the southern Yukon Territory, and British Columbia. That high will grow stronger, if you notice the maps here, going through the course of the weekend. So we are looking for things to improve there in the Panhandle for Saturday. Back to the west, the next system and warm front will be working its way toward the southwest and west coasts, including St. Lawrence Island. There will be some snow and blowing snow as that initially comes in, but there is much warmer air out over the Bering back toward the central Aleutians. That's going to help the precipitation change over to some freezing rain or rain by Sunday. and we're not expecting anything too terribly heavy, but nevertheless quite a change from the cold weather that we saw in these areas back earlier this month and certainly in November. So looking at lows Saturday morning, still below freezing in the Panhandle. Coldest there 10 above around Skagway, Haines, but 30-ish Ketchikan, Heidelberg, on over to Craig. 13 below, still possible there at Glen Allen, but otherwise staying above the 20s there, west side of the Alaska Range. Saturday afternoon, the temp may not be warm enough there for, say, Anchorage or even Talkeetna. Certainly looking at warmer temperatures out along the Alaska Peninsula above freezing, Kodiak, King Salmon. And then for Sunday morning lows, still coming upward a bit. Cooler, though, there along the inner canals of the Panhandle, teens for lows. And then Sunday afternoon, I think Anchorage there could be warmer, 19. And certainly areas notice there, Kodiak 39. Some areas there, as you start getting out along the Alaska Peninsula, could even be flirting with 40. Along the Arctic coast, below zero, Yukon flats, but it's considerably warmer than it was. 20s overnight lows creeping upward along the Yukon River Valley. And for Saturday afternoon, temperatures will continue to inch upward there through the middle Yukon Valley, east of Norton Sound. And then as we go into Sunday morning, we'll see lows generally upper teens to near 20 there as we get around Galena southwestward. Below zero, though, still along the Arctic coast. And then look at that push of warmer air Sunday afternoon. Temperatures above freezing there across much of the Seward Peninsula and extending down into the southwestern areas. We'll show you that in just a moment. Saturday morning lows creeping upward should generally be in the 20s across the southwest interior, above freezing as you extend out across the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians. High temperatures Saturday afternoon will continue to creep upwards above freezing along the southwest coast, including Bristol Bay, extending upward through the Kuskokwim River, the lower Kuskokwim River Basin, and then temperatures generally above 40 get around, say, Cold Bay, Falls Pass, westward across the Aleutian Chain. And then Sunday morning lows generally will again stay above freezing. But look at the highs Sunday afternoon. We're looking for highs that could be in the 30s to near 40 degrees across the southwest interior, including Bethel and Aniak. And then look at out along the Aleutian Chain, mid and even upper 40s, a real possibility, as this is definitely the warmer ridge of air is in place over those areas. And then as we look at the temperature outlook, extended temperature forecast centered on Christmas time, we are still looking for the potential for below to much below normal temperatures there in the southeast over the Panhandle. Wouldn't last very long. And other parts of the state are going to see some milder periods of weather in between that. So overall, I think we are definitely going to not have to deal with the cold that we've seen here for such a long time. And then drier conditions along the Gulf Coast for a change as we go through the Christmas holiday, with maybe precipitation averaging slightly above normal along and north of the Yukon River from Fairbanks on up toward Arctic Village, Utqiagvik, and Kotzebue. But I think the most important thing to note is that we definitely are going to be seeing some milder weather. These Bering low pressure systems are going to bring increasingly milder weather to especially the west and southwest side of the state.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
It's aviation weather time, and if you have flights planned this weekend, especially Saturday through Sunday, we do have an active weather pattern. Most notably, we've had one low pressure area move into the west side of the state. It extends now from the interior northwest down through approaching south central areas into the Gulf with kind of a couple weak lows and troughs. More importantly, there's another low out in the western Bering, a stronger frontal system. It's going to bring wind, snow mixing with changing to even potentially some rain, freezing rain along portions of the west-southwest coast. This is a milder system. Milder air will be invading the west as we speak through the weekend, spreading further eastward. And high pressure is going to build over the lower Yukon in the southern portion of the Yukon territory. Look for high pressure to build through the course of the weekend, where the coldest air will reside just east of Alaska. Well, let's take a look at Saturday afternoon. Widespread IFR conditions continuing across portions near and south of the Alaska Range, on up through the Yukon River along the Arctic coast, and then back through the southwest and out over the Bering. And for Sunday morning, widespread IFR conditions from the central interior all the way across much of the southwest and west, including the Seward Peninsulas, and extending down into the Alaska Peninsula and out in the central Aleutians. And for Sunday afternoon, look for those widespread IFR conditions continuing from along the south slopes of the Brooks Range through the Yukon Valley, all the way back through the Seward Peninsula, down through the southwest, much of the southwest portion of the state, into the eastern and central Aleutians. Pass conditions on Saturday, Anaktuvuk Pass should generally remain IFR, as will Atigun Pass. As we go further south and west, we also expect Lake Clark and Merrill to generally hold on to IFR conditions. It could be MVFR-ish, especially the east entrances east of there toward Cook Inlet. And then for Saturday, look for Rainy Pass IFR becoming MVFR. Same thing at Windy Pass, IFR early becoming MVFR. Isabel, though further east, should generally hold on to IFR conditions. And right now, Metasta looks like it could start out with VFR conditions Saturday morning becoming MVFR. Further south and west, Tanita, MVFR becoming IFR. And then same thing for Portage, MVFR conditions becoming IFR, especially across that area there for Saturday afternoon and evening. And then looking at the northern panhandle at Chilkoot and White Passes, we expect MVFR conditions to become VFR, again, as high pressure begins to build there over the lower Yukon territory. This is going to allow for some drier conditions there in the panhandle. Freezing levels Saturday morning. Surface freezing level extends off the panhandle coast there into the Gulf, and then out across just north end of Kodiak Island, the entrance of Alaska Peninsula, and then out over the central Bering. And you can see freezing levels climbing up to 6,000 feet as you get out there toward the central western half of the Aleutian chain in response to that push of warmer air, ridge of high pressure that's building over the North Pacific and Bering Sea. Greatest threat for icing will be between 3,000 and 12,000 feet out there across the western Bering. Across the mainland between 2,000 and 8,000 feet, but rather isolated, and then a pocket of moderate icing potentially there, British Columbia, out toward the south end of Haida Gwaii between 3,000 and 10,000 feet. Looking at the upper level jet stream pattern, 30,000 feet, a big warm upper ridge, high pressure centered south of the eastern Aleutians in the North Pacific, but we have this anticyclonic jet with maximum winds between 155 to 185 miles per hour, or knots rather, off the Kamchatka coast. As we drop down to 9,000 feet, we see that feature a little further south and east, the high centered south of the eastern Aleutians, with winds in excess of 100 knots from the southwest there out from the western Aleutians into the central Bering. And then dropping her further down, 3,000 feet, we see strongest winds out from the central Bering into the western and central Aleutians, and that translates to some turbulence. The greatest threat for turbulence, in fact, isolated severe turbulence along the western and central Aleutian chain, surface to 3,000 feet. Further east, there's going to be considerable moderate turbulence along the Alaska Peninsula, extending up into the southwest coast, and also on the northwest side of the Alaska Range, and that would be some turbulence there, considerable moderate turbulence between the surface and 4,000 feet. So there's your aviation weather for this upcoming weekend. If you are planning a flight, check the latest conditions and forecast, and have a safe one.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen, and actually collapse. We're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The Western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles in nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected. And the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, when it comes to talking about sea ice edge, we're entering now more of a retreat and melt pattern as milder air and various windy weather systems are going to be working their way across the Bering. And this is going to cause the ice to shift and retreat north and at times even westward as we go through this upcoming weekend and early next week. Overall, these Bering systems are going to bring increasingly milder air to the state, especially in through the southwest areas. So just anticipate more of the same coming up. It's not going to be nearly as cold as it had been here earlier in December and for the entire month of November. So Saturday's marine forecast for the southeast panhandle, winds will be northerly inner canals, 15 to 25 knots with some gusts upwards to 35-40 knots there in Lynn Canal. And then on the outer Gulf Coast, there we're looking at winds north at 20 to 25 knots, waves 8 to 11 feet, and then northwesterly to 20 knots, waves around 7 feet, Yakutat westward. And for Sunday, offshore flow continues generally there off the intercoastal mountains from the north and northeast. Could be as high as 30 knots in Lynn Canal with 7-foot waves. Along the coast, generally northerly winds, Gustavus south through Sitka and Craig, 15 knots, waves 6-7 feet. And winds either east or northerly there, Yakutat westward, waves 6 to 7 feet. For Saturday across south central areas, northwest winds 15 knots, 3-foot waves at Prince William Sound. And the strongest winds will be there at the entrance of Cook Inlet, northeast of Kodiak and southeast of the Kenai Peninsula at westerly winds around 25 knots, waves 10 to 12 feet. Sunday winds come down a bit further, generally 15 knots from the north there in Prince William Sound with waves only a foot, and maybe as much as 25 knots there northeast of Kodiak with waves perhaps as high as say 10 to 12 feet, but everywhere else generally 5 to 6 feet. For Saturday, across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, region-wide winds are going to be out of the west around 30 knots, waves on the Gulf side around 10 to 14 feet. Higher there on the Bering side as you get north of Cold Bay, upwards to 19 feet. As the next system is going to be approaching, the next frontal system approaching from the west, look for winds to turn more southerly by Sunday and picking up to 30 knots. Generally, though, out of the west at 25 knots around Kodiak Island for Sunday. And we are going to expect waves off on the North Pacific Gulf side around 10 feet. And about 13 feet or so there north of Cold Bay. And then across the Aleutians, this is where the real action will be. The eastern Aleutians will see southwest winds turning south 30 to 40 knots. And as you get through the central Aleutians, increasing southerly 40 to 45 knots. And west of Adak, we're looking for south 50 knot storm force winds with higher gusts. The core of strongest winds and waves will be passing to the north of the central and western Aleutians. And then across the region on Sunday, generally south to southwest winds, 35 to 40 knot gales, waves upwards to 20 to say 15 to 25 feet on the North Pacific side, 30 feet there near Kiska, and then you can see the leeward shelter of the islands there, especially across the eastern and central Aleutians on the Bering side with waves about 15 feet. Across the west coast, the ice will shift around with these stronger winds coming in. We're seeing winds picking up upwards to 40 knots at St. Paul and St. George, waves building to 19 feet. And those winds will get pick up out of the south-southwest as we go through Saturday night into Sunday to 35 to 40 knot gales. So again, that ice is going to be retreating northward, and also there's going to be melting as temperatures get above freezing, especially from the Seward Peninsula southward. For the Arctic coast Saturday, winds will be out of the east 20 to 25 knots. Ice in place, they'll turn northeast to north through the lower Chukchi Sea at around 15 to 20 knots, and eastward to 30 knots north of Nunavik, or north of St. Lawrence Island. And then for the day Sunday, winds along the Arctic coast out of the east will be a bit stronger, 25 to upwards to 35 knots at Utqiagvik, and then along the northwest coast, easterly winds to 35 knots, turning southerly 35 to 40 knot gales through the strait. So the ice will shift around a bit. Be careful, because any breaks or openings there could be rather dangerous. Other than that, we're watching low pressure, the initial system moving into the interior overnight early Saturday, and here comes the next weather system out there across the Bering. That's going to spread some heavier snows, changing to a mix of rain and freezing rain from the Seward Peninsula down along the southwest coast. That does it for tonight's show. Thank you for watching. I'll be back tomorrow night.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.